Welcome back. All right, we've got a clogged middle of the standings right now in the National Hockey League, and I wanted to talk about that today. So we've got 12 teams on the board, starting with LA and ending with Seattle all the way down here. There's 3 points separating these 12 teams in the standings, 5 of them in the West, 7 of them out of the East. So trying to figure out who's going to make the playoffs and all that's going to be a lot of fun this year. It is. So at the top of the board, we've got the LA Kings, 41 games played, 21-12-8 record, 50 points, but they're 1-5-4 over their last 10. LA absolutely trending in the wrong direction right now. They're number 3 in the Pacific, and when we look month by month, in October they were 5-2-2, good start, and in November good as well, 8-2-1, and then it starts to kind of erode here. 7-4-2 in December, 1-4-3 in January. So only having won 1 out of 8 in January means they're not that far ahead of Edmonton, and they're not that far ahead of the teams at the bottom of this board either. The LA Kings are in some trouble. Although when you look at playoff probabilities, and I grabbed them from 4 different sites today, the Athletic gives LA the best chance at 92% with their model. Money Puck is second at 88%, Hockey Reference 86%, and then Left Wing Lock, their percentages, they have them at 77%. So of the teams on the board, I think they're one of the few that the Athletic gives them the best odds. Left Wing Lock gives them the worst odds, and it just drops as it goes along. But for the LA Kings, that 92% seems high based on how they're playing right now. One thing that strength of schedule doesn't really take into consideration is, so how are they playing against teams that are beneath them in the standings? And right now for LA, it doesn't seem to matter who they're playing lately. They're just not getting the victories. Then you've got Toronto. I talked about them today. I also want to say, I forgot about the Kadri suspension. Apologies for that. But either way, it doesn't change anything I had to say in that Toronto video. I still think Kadri could have been useful for Toronto this year. But that's a whole other discussion. Their record, 21-13-8, 50 points. They're 4-4-2 over their last 10. They're still third in the Atlantic, but only by a hair. Only 1 point ahead of Detroit. They do have a game in hand on Detroit, but games in hand, you have to win them. So they're number 3 in the Atlantic. When you look at October, they were 5-3-1. There was plenty of consternation then. November, the record not too bad, 7-3-2. December, 5-4-4, and then in January, 4-3-1. Not really a dominant month to be found, but if they can keep getting more regulation wins than regulation losses, or more wins than regulation losses, I should say, they should still stay in the hunt for a playoff spot. But that 4-4-2 over their last 10 is troubling. The percentages, Athletic has them at an 87% chance of making the playoffs. Both Money Puck and Hockey Reference say 70%. Left Wing Lock, 65%. So those numbers have to be at least somewhat troubling. Again, these models all work differently. The Edmonton Oilers, everybody's pretty bullish about the Edmonton Oilers. 40 games, 24-15-1 record, 49 points. So they're only 1 point back of LA. They've played one last game. They are the number 1 wild card in the West. In October, they were famously 2-5-1, and it got worse before they fired the coach. 7-7 in November, 9-3 in December, and a perfect 6-0 in January, as they've now won 11 games in a row. They're 10-0 in their last 10 and 11-0 in their last 11. Their odds of making the playoffs, the Athletic has them at 97%, Money Puck has them at 96%, Hockey Reference 83%, and Left Wing Lock at 73%. So Left Wing Lock not as sold on the Oilers, I guess, as others, but I can't see them missing the playoffs now, not with the run they've been on lately. Detroit, and this is where the numbers are really all over the place. 43 games, 22-16-5 record, 49 points. 6-3-1 in their last 10 games. They were the number 1 wild card in the East currently. When you look at it month by month, they were 6-3-1 in October, 6-4-2 in November, 5-9-1 in December, and 5-0-1 in January. Now, if you look at playoff probabilities, 17% from the Athletic, 39% from Money Puck. Hockey Reference says 57%, and Left Wing Lock says 54%. So the percentages are really all over the place, and it really illustrates just how close these teams are, and when you're trying to figure out who is or isn't going to make the playoffs, there's 2 that say Detroit has a good chance and 2 that say they don't. So we shall see how it all turns out for Detroit. But those numbers are better than they have been in some of their previous seasons, so that's good news if you're a Wings fan. Then we got Nashville, 24-19-1 record in 44 games, 49 points, 5-4-1 in their last 10 games. They are the number 2 wild card in the West, but there are a couple of teams coming up behind them here. So for the Nashville Predators, 4-5 was their record in October. Then they're 7-6 in November, 9-5-1, really strong December, followed by 4-3 so far in the month of January. Their odds of making the playoffs, 30% on The Athletic. They are the lowest number. 43% on Money Puck, 42% on Hockey Reference, 46% on Left Wing Lock, meaning I guess they all hate Nashville. I'm kidding. But not quite 50% from 3 of the 4. But they're in the mix, and 46%, 43, 42. It's not bad. There are teams in the NHL that would love to have those odds of making the playoffs. Then you have Tampa Bay. Surprisingly, not overwhelming favorites to make the playoffs this year, and I figured I'd wear Tampa because it does feel like, I talked in the Toronto video about how it feels like their peak has been reached, and now there's that descent. And it feels like for Tampa Bay, there's a bit of a descent going on here too, and then it's up to Julien Brisebois to try to reverse that trend. 44 games, 22-17-5 record for 49 points. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They are the number 2 wild card in the East, although there are a couple of teams a point back that have games in hand on Tampa Bay. 4-2-3 was their record in October, 6-7-2 in November, 8-6 in December, and 4-2 in January. So they're trending in the right direction since the start of December. They've been 12-8 overall, and we'll see if they can keep putting up wins at that rate, because if they do, then they'll justify the positive numbers here. 58% chance of making the playoffs from The Athletic, 61% from Money Puck, which is the highest number, 50% from Hockey Reference, and 44% for Left Wing Lock. So, again, the percentages are so all over the place. I saw the standings today, and I was thinking, this is crazy. I don't know that I've seen this many teams this close halfway through the year. And Pittsburgh's in here too. 42 games, 21-15-6. And I have to mention the exact same record as the Washington Capitals. Talked about how these teams seem to be tied together. This is a good example. Both of them with 48 points, though trending in different directions. Pittsburgh 6-2-1 in their last 10 games. Washington 4-5-1 in their last 10 games. And the months that have been. For Pittsburgh, they were 3-6 in the month of October. Washington was 4-3-1. In the month of November, they were close to one another. 8-4-1 for Pittsburgh, 8-3-1 for Washington. In the month of December, 7-3-3 record for Pittsburgh, 5-5-4 for that month for Washington. And this month so far, 3-2-2 record for Pittsburgh, 4-4 record for the Washington Capitals. But then you get into playoff probabilities, and it looks like Washington's schedule upcoming is much more difficult than Pittsburgh's. Pittsburgh has an 80% chance of making the playoffs for The Athletic. Washington has a 16% chance. According to Money Puck, 70% chance we see Pittsburgh in the playoffs, 4% chance for Washington. Hockey Reference gives 60% as a chance for Pittsburgh, 20% chance for Washington. So the interesting thing is, higher percent chance for Washington, lower percent chance for Pittsburgh, but still, the difference is huge. But Left Wing Lock likes Washington more at 48% compared to the 47% for Pittsburgh. So odd, right? Those numbers are really odd that we see Left Wing Lock, and I did double check to make sure it's this season and all. But yeah, that number is different. They're actually giving Washington a better chance than Tampa. So even though 4% chance for Money Park for Washington, 61% chance for Tampa, it'll be fun to see which one of these end up being right. The New York Islanders, 44 games, 19-15-10 record, 48 points. So their problem too is they're tied with 44 games for the most played on the board. So they don't have the amount of games left. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. So that's trending in the wrong direction. And when you look at the record, 4-2-2 in the month of October, 5-5-4 in the month of November, 8-3-3 in December, and 2-5-1 so far in the month of January. And they're this year's argument. Last year was Calgary. The year before, I believe it was Dallas, where teams if they're getting points, and they're getting points. They're not winning, but they're getting points. Eventually, those teams that are getting those points in extra time, they tend to end up not getting those points in extra time, as we've seen with the Islanders lately, and that's where you start sliding out of the playoff picture. They have a 29% chance of making the playoffs, according to The Athletic, 12% according to Money Puck, 21% on Hockey Reference, and again, Left Wing Lock kind of likes them better. 36% chance according to Left Wing Lock, but all of those are below 50%. New Jersey Devils, who are a point behind the Islanders but have played 3 less games. They have a record of 22-16-3, 47 points. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10 games, so they're trending in the right direction. 5-2-1 in October, 6-7 in November, 8-5-1 in December, 3-2-1 in the month of January. And for New Jersey, the odds of them making the playoffs are okay. 51% chance according to The Athletic, 75% chance for Money Puck. So they're much more sold on New Jersey than anybody else. 47% chance for Hockey Reference, 49% chance for Left Wing Lock. So last year when I did this, I used Athletic, Money Puck, and Hockey Reference, and this time I'm adding Left Wing Lock to it as well, because why not? But for New Jersey, it's been a very up and down season. We'll see. It's going to depend on Hughes. It's going to depend on staying healthy. It's going to depend on getting that goaltending that they need. Calgary, 44 games played, 21-18-5 record, 47 points. They are 7-3 in their last 10 games. And month by month, in October, 2-6-1, as really both teams in Alberta had nightmare Octobers. 8-4-2 in the month of November, 5-6-2 in December, 6-2 so far in January. So very up and down season. Good October, or good November, I should say, and a good January thus far. Poor October and poor December numbers. 38% chance of making the playoffs from The Athletic. That's the highest number on the board. But it's not too far. The discrepancy between the numbers with Calgary are close. 23% in Money Puck, 35% from both Hockey Reference and Left Wing Lock. So, again, if you're a Flames fan, you can shake your fist at that. Prove them wrong. And then Seattle. They have 19-16-9 as their record, 47 points, also in 44 games. They're 8-2 in their last 10. The two, though, being their two most recent games. Where, of course, if they'd won them, they'd be ahead of LA right now, but they didn't. So this is just how close it is. If Seattle had won their most recent two games, they would be number 1 on the board rather than number 12. That's how close this is. Now, in the month of October, Seattle was 3-5-2. They were 5-5-4 in November, 6-4-3 in December, 5-2 so far in the month of January. So whereas the Islanders have taken all those overtime and shootout loss points, and now they're not getting them, for Seattle, they're not getting them, but they're also winning more games. So the Islanders haven't been winning the games Seattle has. We'll see how it goes for them from here. Keeping in mind that Seattle and the Islanders are really, really close to one another in terms of overall production. But 22% for The Athletic in terms of the chance that Seattle makes the playoffs. I'm also aware Seattle and the Islanders are not the same conference. 50% chance of making the playoffs according to Money Puck, which is the highest number on the board. And 30% for Hockey Reference, 32% for Left Wing Lock. So it really is all over the place with Seattle as well. And we'll see which ones make the playoffs and which ones don't. But what this tells me is we have a league now where this is what they're talking about with parity. So when they talk about parity, this is where it is right in the middle. You've got all kinds of teams that you can make an argument for why they can make the playoffs. You've got teams above the playoff line. You can make the arguments for why they won't make the playoffs. But from now until game 82, I'm excited to see how this goes because it really is unpredictable, isn't it? And while we can take all the percentages and all that, it changes from day to day. It changes from week to week. Before I had a channel, I used to look at that and see where the percentage chances were for teams I rooted for. And it was interesting to me how they would change from day to day and week to week, which I haven't had a segment on here talking about that. But I do like to take a look at the standings and discuss it with all you fine people on the internet. And in this case, it's almost half the league that's on the board because these teams are all very close. And I've had to crop out some teams. I was going to make this within 5 points. I thought, hey, 50 to 45. There's too many teams. Because if you go down to 45, I think there's 3 more teams that close. So it is a very, very close race right now. And part of the reason I want to do this is because this is what makes power rankings sometimes a nightmare. These teams are all close to one another. Again, you can make an argument for or against almost any team on this board. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Which teams make it, which ones don't. And which team that's not on the board, that's in the playoffs, do you think actually ends up falling out? Or which team that's not on the board and is below the playoff line, do you think, you know what, they could have a great second half and make the playoffs? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.